So we're going to be in John chapter 9 this morning, and the title of the sermon is One Thing I Know. And we'll get to that in a little bit because it's a really, really cool part of this story. But let me set the scene a little bit. So Mark last week talked about the woman caught in adultery and how Jesus kind of stepped in the stoning circle with her and told her to go now and leave your life of sin when no one else was left to stone her. And right after that, he kind of makes this big statement in John chapter 8. And he says, I'm the light of the world, and if anyone would follow me, he won't walk in darkness, but he'll walk in light. And so he makes this big claim that he's the light. And he's claimed it before. John started chapter 1 with that. And then in John 7, Jesus says again, if anyone would believe in me, if anyone's thirsty, let him come to me and drink, and he'll have rivers of living water. So Jesus claimed to be this light and this living water. Okay, and now what was going on in chapter 7 and 8 was called the Feast of Tabernacles. And it was this feast to, really these are built and set to help us remember God, his character, who he is, things about him. And the way this feast started is 8 days long, and at the beginning they would have this procession to the water of Siloam, okay? And that's part of this story. And what they would do is they would take a pitcher of water and a pitcher of wine, and they would go back to the temple. And this pool of Siloam was actually fed from a spring, okay, that while Hezekiah was king, it was kind of dug over and moved and brought to where they had it. And so they would get water from that, and it was this living water, this fresh water, because it was a natural spring. And so they would get the water, and they would pour out a drink offering. And at the very end of this feast, to kind of finish the time this week, they would light these huge candelabras. And I don't mean something that we could set on stage. They would not fit in this room. They were said to be about 75 feet tall, and they'd light around 18 to 20 of them. And at the top, they would have these bowls, and a servant would climb a ladder and fill it with oil and then set it ablaze. So imagine, and the place they would put them was in this open court. So if you were in the city, you could be a couple miles away. And when they lit these, you could see them for miles. They would be these huge flames, and everyone would know what was being celebrated. And it was kind of symbolic of God's glory being in the temple. Okay, and so Jesus makes these claims that I am the living water and I am light. Okay, and he does this on purpose in this festival, this Feast of Tabernacles. The beginning part, they deal with water, and at the end, they deal with light. And Jesus makes these claims in chapter 7 and 8 that's me. That's actually me. I'm the light that's come into the world. I have living water. And so we come to this story, and this is about a man born blind. And what I want to do is I want to read, it's not a long chapter, but it's the full story, and I want to read all of it because I think it's all important. And so what we're going to do is little by little, I'll go through it, and we'll talk about little parts that as I studied, I wanted to just jump into a little bit. And at the end, we'll talk about why is this story in here? The questions I ask when I come to a passage like this is, why would God put this story now? Why is this included in his word? Why was this important then, and why is it important to me now? What difference does it make for me? So let's jump into John 9. And it says this, as he passed by. So here's what happened. Jesus had made some other statements, and the Pharisees were getting ready to stone him. And it says he just kind of left before they could kill him. And it says, so as he's leaving the temple, he walks by, and it says, as he passed by, he saw a man born blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And now it would have been common kind of acceptance that in that day, if someone was hurt or had a birth defect, or there was some natural disaster or calamity in someone's life, people would just say, hey, they must have sinned. And we see it in Job. His friends are like, just look, you sinned, you did something wrong, clearly, so just repent of it, ask for forgiveness, and we'll be on our way. And so that was just kind of this accepted thing, and we'll see it later from the Pharisees at the end of the story. And Jesus says to him, he just rejects that notion. He says, it was not this man that sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work, and as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And I like the way the Message actually says that, because I think it's an important thing even today. This is a little theological nuance that we kind of maybe even sometimes accept, oh, someone must have sinned for that to happen. It must be their sin or something like that. And sometimes things just happen. Does God know it? Is God sovereign? Does he know that? Does any of that surprise him? No. But I think there's different questions that we can ask. And this is what Eugene Peterson writes when he kind of translates this passage. He says, Jesus said to his disciples, "You're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. And there's no such cause and effect here. Look instead for what God can do. We need to be energetically at work for the one who sent me here, working while the sun shines, because when night falls, the workday is over. For as long as I am in the world, there is plenty of light, and I am the world's light." And so what Jesus was rejecting was the idea that someone had to have sinned for this bad thing to happen. And instead, and what was thought was, okay, if this bad thing's happened, now God can show his glory. And instead what Jesus is saying is, look, I've come into the world so God can show his glory. It's me. It's all about me. And so he kind of approaches this man, and this is what it says. It says, having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. So Jesus spits on the ground, makes this paste, puts it on the man's eyes and says, "All right, go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Comes back, and this guy now has sight. He has never seen a day in his life. He was born blind. He's never seen light. He's never seen color. He's never seen the face of the people that walk by him every day. He's never seen his parents. All of those things are new to him, and he gains sight. And I love this little thing in here. Jesus, so this man was sent by Jesus to the pool called Sent, which was part of the Feast of Tabernacles, that celebration, that procession, by the one who was sent from God, Jesus. And this man comes back and he experiences this living water at the pool of Siloam in a profound way. Not like everyone else had experienced it with this procession and this drink offering that was poured out, but it gave him sight. He was able to see because Jesus intervened in his life. And so we come to this guy, we come back, and here's where the story gets a little juicy. It says, the neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Isn't this the guy, the man who used to sit and beg?" And some said, it is he. And others said, "No, but he is like him." And he kept saying, "I'm the man. That's me. It was me. It was me." So they said to him, "Then how are your eyes open?" And he told them, "The man called Jesus made mud. He anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight." And they said to him, "Where is he?" And he goes, "I don't know. I don't know where he is." And they brought him to the Pharisees. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. And now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Now, we know the Pharisees love to make sure people keep the Sabbath and make sure that people follow the rules. But Jesus wasn't necessarily going to fit into what they wanted. And so the Pharisees questioned the man. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such things?" And there was a division among them. So they said it again to the blind man, "What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes?" And he said, "He is a prophet." Now, there are very few things in life that make me mad. I'm really a laid-back person. There are lots of times that stuff just rolls off my shoulders and it doesn't bother me. And there's only a couple instances, couple things that will really take me from 0 to 100 in no time, okay? One of those is mess with my family, like hurt them or treat them disrespectfully. It boils my blood. And I bet a lot of us are like that. The other thing that I noticed was when someone by their own doing puts other people in danger and doesn't care, okay? Last weekend, I took Christy and the kids. We went to West Branch, just this beautiful state park, probably about 40 minutes from here. And they have this beachfront that you can just go to, and it's awesome. It's this huge lake. There's boats everywhere, and last weekend it was just beautiful. So we said, let's go swim. And we packed a lunch, and we were sitting on the beach, and we were really close. The boats can actually pull up onto the sand, just kind of beach themselves, and people can get out and hang out. It's really cool. You should go. And so we're there, and we're playing, and Landon is letting the waves from the boats just hit him in the face. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And he just starts laughing, and he throws himself back into the water. I'm like, what's wrong with you, kid? So he's drinking lake water. Addie's swimming, which just means she's jumping around in the water. And Christy and I, we're laughing at him. We're having a good time, and there's people everywhere. And there's kind of a designated swim area with buoys marked. And if you go outside of it, that's where the boats are allowed to go. So really, it's not to your benefit to go outside that. So we're in that, and all of a sudden, I just hear the most profane screaming in my life. Just everything. Stuff I haven't heard, like words strung together that I haven't heard since working at the golf course in high school. Okay, it was angry, and some guy was just screaming at people. And I turn around, and there was a guy on a boat, okay, and he's not flying, his engine isn't blaring or anything like that, but he's pulling through people that are swimming. And he is screaming at them, going, you're in the wrong, just fill in the blank, whatever you think of. That's what he said, okay? You can't swim here. This is for the boats, and like just screaming at people. And there's families, there's little kids on either side of his boat now. He kind of just divided people in half because he felt like he was so right and had to be in the middle. And he pulls through, and he parks his boat, and he's just by himself on his boat. And he's looking for a sympathetic ear on the beach of someone to just like, hey, can you believe they're swimming there? And people are just like, no, you're a jerk. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you pull through people? That's crazy. Just pull over there. There's a spot. And so he's mad, and he's like, I saw some kids moving the buoy, and it's supposed to be over here, and I'm going to go tell the ranger. So he backs his boat out again, pulls back, finds the park ranger who is out on a boat. They're out there for 10 to 15 minutes, and he pulls back in, and he's still like yipping at people, and it's just bugging me. And the ranger pulls up to the buoy, and the guy kind of swims out. And the ranger looks at it, and he goes, no one's moved this buoy. You're wrong. He goes, no one's moved this. It's right where it should be. And the guy's like yelling at the ranger, like, no, I saw some kids move it. And the ranger goes, no. And he just gets in his boat and pulls away. Like, just totally ignores the guy, like, you were just flat out wrong. What's wrong with you? And this guy swims back to his boat, but he doesn't move. Like, he can't fathom, for whatever reason, he couldn't fathom that he was wrong. There was no way in which he could see that he was wrong. And so he sat on his boat literally for 2 or 3 more hours. And I kind of felt bad for him because he's just by himself. The people that were sitting where he pulled moved because they didn't want to be near him. And no one would walk around him. And it was this weird thing that happened on a Sunday. And it bothered me all week because I was like, why would someone do that? And as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, I think there's people in this story in particular that have this same mindset that cannot be wrong. That just absolutely cannot be wrong. See, the Pharisees said, when they heard that this man was healed, they said, this guy that healed you, Jesus, he can't be from God because he broke the Sabbath. That's a sin, so God wouldn't listen to him. And so in their view, what they had constructed, this kind of system of their belief, was that this is the way it had to be, and there's no way we can be wrong. And Jesus had kind of upended a couple of those thoughts and beliefs. And so the Sabbath was a big one that they always honed in on. And they're going, well, if he is from God, and he didn't sin, and he healed this man, he did it on the Sabbath, which we would consider work. But that means that it's not sin, so he didn't break the Sabbath, which kind of throws our system into a funk. It makes what we had always thought to be wrong. And so we come to the rest of the story, and the Pharisees really spend the rest of the time kind of grilling people and being mean, trying to uphold the system, because there was just no way they could be wrong. They were the boat guy. They were just mad. And they had the system, and they were afraid of it being kind of collapsed. And so we pick up, the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received the sight until they called the man's parents, who had received, until they called the parents of the man who had received the sight and asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? And his parents said that this is our son and that he was born blind. But how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age, he will speak for himself. And his parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. So they would be kicked out of the temple. And so therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. And they kind of throw their son under the bus. This guy who had never even seen his parents' face probably saw him for the first time. I was like, Mom, Dad. And they're like, you're on your own right now. Like, good luck. And so the Pharisees call him back, and for the second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." And he answered, he goes, "Whether he is a sinner, I don't know." And the Pharisees wanted to comment on Jesus' spiritual state, and he just goes, "I don't know. But the one thing that I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." The Pharisees were so caught up in whether or not Jesus had broken the Sabbath, they missed a person being brought from blindness to sight. They missed an incredible miracle because they were so caught up in, did he break the Sabbath? Did he do something wrong here when this man was healed? And that's what the guy's trying to get him to see. One thing I know, I was blind and now I see. And they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I've told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" That kind of gets him fired up. And I have to wonder if the guy knew that would make him mad. And he was kind of like, "You're so thick. Don't you get it yet?" And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciples, but we're disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from." And the man answered, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him." And he comments on the incredibleness of this particular miracle. "Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind." There were lots of blind people in that day. And this man's going, "Look, have you ever heard of anyone receiving their sight after being born blind? No. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." And they answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and you would teach us?" And they cast him out. These Pharisees were being told, "Look, I don't know if he's a sinner or not. I know one thing is that he healed me. He gave me sight when I was blind. That's what he did for me. Don't you see that?" And the Pharisees were like, "How are you going to teach us? You were born in utter sin." And they had that same worldview that the disciples asked Jesus about right at the beginning of the story of, well, someone must have sinned for this particular thing to happen. And they kick him out of the temple. So Jesus heard that they had cast him out. And having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And he answered, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." And he said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains." It's an incredible story. And the Pharisees missed the one big thing that happened to keep their little system of belief held together. They totally missed a guy that was born blind being given sight. And Jesus uses that opportunity, uses this miracle, uses what was happening in the Feast of Tabernacles to teach them a lesson, to show them something. Why is it important? All right, so this guy that was born blind, society had basically foreclosed on him. There was no seeing eye dog or library for the blind with Braille books for him to learn or read. Men weren't lining up to give their daughters away to this guy. He didn't have a way to make money. It's not like it is today. It wasn't the same. This guy sat and begged probably. He didn't have much hope. And so Jesus, by giving him sight, not only just gave him sight, he gave him life. He restored this guy. He made him whole. And the Pharisees missed a person. They missed that happening because they were so convinced that their system of belief was right and true. They were so entrenched in what they thought it had to be like. And Jesus was coming saying, like, look, here's a person. I'm the light of the world. I'm living water. The feast that you're celebrating, this festival, is about me. It's pointing to me. It always has. But why does that matter for us? Why does this story fit and fall right here? Why is it important for me? Why is it important for you? What changes when we walk out the doors? And I like this story in particular because I like to read myself into characters in the story. And this one was really easy. I read myself into the blind man. And I think we can all relate. Like, we're blind and Jesus gives us sight. And I think I like relating to that guy and seeing myself in him because he's pretty humble. He doesn't have all this great wisdom and all these things that he has knowledge-wise built up. He's just a guy that's blind on the street. And Jesus heals him. And then he has courage to stand up to the highest of the high in this religious order, to go, I don't know what else you want from me. The one thing I know is that I was blind and now I see. And he kind of pokes at the Pharisees a little bit. Like he's got a sense of humor, he's courageous, and his parents bail on him. Like this guy kind of he's a great model of a disciple of what someone who knows Jesus would look like. And I love reading myself into that character. But what God revealed to me as I was studying and praying is that more often than not, I'm not the blind man. More often than not, I'm probably the Pharisees. I'm probably that guy in the boat. Because when push comes to shove, I think, and what I've seen in my life, is that sometimes when things make me uncomfortable, I've built this little system of belief and want to hold on to it. And want to make it, this is how it has to be, and it can't be any other way, and this is it. And if that's challenged, if someone pushes against that even a little bit, I'm more defensive. I probably get more offensive. And I would attack. And I would say, well, I've got all this wisdom and knowledge. And I think in religious circles, we tend to do that. If we've grown up in church, we probably have this system of belief that we hold really dear to us. And if it's challenged a little bit, we become like the Pharisees. And I don't think it's on purpose. I don't think I sit back and go, well, how can I be legalistic and how can I offend people and how can I push people away and build myself up a little bit? I just think it's a natural thing that we do for survival a little bit. Because for the Pharisees, they didn't have a source of living water other than the pool of Siloam. They didn't have a source of light. And Jesus came to give them that. Landon is really funny. My son, he's almost 2. And he's hysterical. And there are times when I try and point to something. And I'll be like, Landon, it's right there. And I'm right beside him pointing at it. And he's just looking around like, where? I don't see it. And I'm like, Landon, it's right there, buddy. And I literally have to walk him over to it and tilt his head so he sees it. And it's funny for a 2-year-old to have that. Okay, that's a really that's kind of a joy in my life. But if I had an adult friend that was sharp, was with it, and I was like, hey, or even let's use this morning as an example. No one turn around. If I was like, hey, on that back wall, you guys got to see this. It's incredible. There's a clock. You just got to look. And every one of you, without turning around, said oh yeah, we see it. And you pointed to the front wall. I would look at you like, you're crazy. You didn't even see it. It's back there. Would you just look? And it would be like every one of you going, no, yeah, we get it. Yeah, it's right there. We see. And me going, can you just hold on a second? Look behind you. And everyone going, yep, we're good. We see it. That's what the Pharisees did. Jesus was trying to show them something incredible by saying he had the source of living water, by saying he was the light. And they were going, oh yeah, we see it, we get it, we're good. We have sight. And he's going, no, you don't. You don't get it. That's why when they said, are we blind also? And he's going, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. Just like this man. But no, you claim that the lights are on. You claim that you see it, but you don't get it. You've missed it. You're not innocent. You carry guilt for that because you are rejecting it. The biggest problem that the Pharisees had, and I want to read this. The most serious condition that these opponents had possessed is their insistence that they were innocent. That they fully understand the theological point Jesus was making, and they reject it. They utterly just say, yeah, we're good, we got it. And they're looking the total opposite direction. Because they claim they can see their guilt is underscored since they're affirming in their religious position against Jesus. And so for us, as we come to this story, as we come to this account, it would be good if we could all say, yeah, I'm just like the blind man. But I think sometimes we know a lot more than just that one thing. that Jesus brought us sight and he gives us life. And I think we want to build up this system of belief that elevates us a little bit, keeps other people kind of at arm's length, that makes us seem better than we actually are. And instead, we should be like that man born blind. And just go, look, I don't know everything there is to know about God. I don't know everything there is to know about Jesus. But the one thing that I know, the one thing that I would walk away with if I interacted with him was that I was blind and he gave me sight. If I was in that city looking at the temple when they lit those giant bowls ablaze, that's the light I imagine that we see in Jesus. That's what I imagine Jesus was pointing to when he said, I'm the light. But that light wears out. The oil burns up. Jesus is eternal. He gives life everlasting, and it starts here. It starts now, and it goes into eternity. And so when we come to him and we accept that life, that's the one thing we can know. That's the one thing we can be sure of, is that he brought us from blindness to sight, from death to life. He restores us. He makes us whole. All of Jesus' healing ministry was to point back to when God created, before Adam and Eve sinned, before the fall. It was good. Jesus was coming to restore and recreate and reconcile all things to himself. It says in Colossians that all things were created in him and through him and for him, and that he is reconciling everything to himself. And that's what Jesus was doing with this man. That's what he's doing for us. But would you recognize, and maybe we're sitting here going, I don't really build up a little structure like that. I don't do that. Chances are, even if we're thinking that we do, we probably have already. We probably have that little thing, and it's challenged a little bit by being told that you do. So maybe we could look and try and be like that blind man who stuck to the one thing he knew. I was blind, but now I see. That's my challenge to us this week. As we walk out, would we stick to the one thing we know? We were blind, but because of Jesus, now we see.